talking about the Flyers moving down the stretch here, as well as the goaltender situation with Kevin Durso. Follow him on Twitter at Kevin_Durso. He covers the Flyers for 97.3 ESPN.com. Kevin, how you doing on this Saturday?
Doing well, Josh. Doing well.
I got to start asking you about Carter Hart. And I mean this partly facetiously, but I also mean this partly seriously. I see the guy delivering pizzas to kids at a school. So why is he in goal? Like, is this injury thing them being precautious? Was it really something legitimate? Like, what is going on with Carter Hart?
Well, the injury was very much legitimate. He admitted later on that, when he tried to push off of the post during the warm-ups in that Thursday game against Montreal, the week of the Stadium Series, that there was something that felt uncomfortable. There was an ankle injury that was involved. So he was definitely hurt. And then from there, the Flyers did want to be cautious about it because this kid is the future of the franchise, and you have to be mindful of that. At the same time, in terms of his injury progression, I would not be surprised if he's not back in net as soon as Monday night against Ottawa. Brian Elliott's going to start tonight against the Islanders, and for what it's worth, had a really good start against them on Sunday. Did have the bad start against Washington, but he did start well against them on Sunday, and also has solid career numbers against the Islanders. So I understand the point of doing that, but as soon as Monday, I would say Carter Hart could be back in goal, definitely in play to be back in goal for the game after that if Monday doesn't work out. Monday's against Ottawa, and Ottawa's a team that's really just trying to get through the rest of the season and going through the motions after trading so many players at the trade deadline. So they're just going through the motions. It's not a bad opportunity to give Cam Talbot a start there as well, just to get him some action and save Carter Hart for his return against Washington in a game that, like all of them, you need to have, but it's a good spot to put him back in net, give him a chance to play, and maybe get his feet wet too. So I'm not so sure that Carter Hart won't be playing on Monday night against Ottawa just to get some of that game action back. He says he's ready to go. Understandably so, the team's going to be a little cautious about it, but at the same time, they know what they're facing here in terms of the playoff picture, and if they want to be involved in this, then he's going to be back in goal sooner rather than later.
Flyers right now sitting with 72 points. You and I talked about this before. It's going to be a tough month ahead of them. So considering the schedule they have in front of them, even if Carter Hart plays well on Monday night, as you mentioned, the home game versus Ottawa, would you expect them to be kind of like an alternating situation between him and Elliott, or do you think they stick with him for the remainder of the schedule for most of those games?
I think they'll look at him as a number one for sure, that just because they have already before the injury happened, and I don't see any problem with doing that and giving him as many as you can in this stretch. I think they'll still be careful to some degree, and also you've got 3 goalies now that you're trying to rotate in, not just 2. You're trying to give Brian Elliott a few starts because, quite frankly, he's earned a few of them with his performance over the last week, Wednesday aside, and you want to see a little bit from Cam Talbot because there's really good odds that the reason he was brought here via trade was to get him re-signed before free agency hits and have him be the veteran backup to Carter Hart next year. So I think all 3 are going to have to see some action in here somewhere in getting a start. And what will be interesting to me about that situation is who's the goalie who gets chosen to be the healthy scratch that night? Who's the third guy in line on any given night? So who are you going to sit there and say is going to sit on the bench and be that backup? For Carter Hart, that could be either guy. But when it's Brian Elliott or Cam Talbot, is Carter Hart going to always be the guy in reserve, or are you going to just take that out of the picture for a game and let either Cam Talbot or Brian Elliott serve as backup to the other and give Carter Hart a night where he gets to just take in the game from the press box for a night if he's not going to go anyway and if it's not in the plans. So that'll be an interesting thing to see, just how they juggle the 3 goalies. But I think Hart's going to be getting most of the starts once he's able to return. Obviously, after tonight, they'll have 14 games remaining. It's safe to say Hart's going to probably, if he's able to go as soon as Monday, he'll get probably at least 7 or 8 of the final 14 starts, and then the other 6 will be split up among Elliott and Talbot.
You mentioned those 14 games. They still got another 2 more games against the Capitals, 2 more games against the Maple Leafs. They got the Penguins on the 17th. It's a tough stretch. I mean, they got the Islanders tonight, and they got them again on March 23rd. I mean, so they can't get away from the Islanders either. This is a stretch of games that, I think most people would argue will probably end their playoff hopes. But what hope do you have, Kevin? Because you watch this team closely, you cover them on a daily basis. What kind of hope do you have of them surviving that schedule on the plus side?
Well, I think it depends on how they come out on any given night. And I look at the last two games as kind of an example. It depends on what team you're going to get. If you get the team that showed up and kind of weathered the storm early on against the Islanders on Sunday and then gets a couple goals and is able to play from in front, this team has been able to show that they can hang with some of these teams. They can mount comebacks against Pittsburgh in the outdoor game and be able to win fairly convincingly against the Islanders and do things like that. At the same time, you look at Wednesday's game and you go, this is a team that's not ready to compete with the likes of Tampa Bay and Toronto and Washington. And a lot of it remains to be seen because, truth be told, you look at the last time they played the Islanders on Sunday. That was their first meeting against the Islanders this season since the end of October. Well, the end of October, this team was obviously completely different than it is now. So it's kind of interesting to see how they stacked up. When they play Toronto, I'm going to be looking for the same thing. The last time they would have played Toronto was the last game that Ron Hextall was GM of this team. And to see how far they've come in that time, maybe they can hang with a team like Toronto now, and as opposed to being completely unprepared like they were for that game at the end of November. So that's the things I'm interested in. The thing that should keep some hope alive for some fans here is that, yes, this schedule is difficult, and the first thing you have to do before you look at anybody else is look at yourself and look at the schedule ahead and know you have to win games. But outside of that, the teams they're chasing all have difficult schedules moving forward, too. Carolina, I believe, only has 3 or 4 games that are against non-playoff teams for the rest of the year. Montreal's got a tough schedule. Columbus has a tough schedule. And most of them have difficult schedules right now, too. So if you can steal a win against the Islanders again, kind of like you did a week ago, where you weather an early storm and then get them kind of scrambling by getting out to a lead like they did at 3 and 4-0 before winning the game 4-1, you can take control of that game. You can win that game. The game on Monday against Ottawa is one that you absolutely have to have, and there's no excuses. Ottawa is just not on the same level as so many other teams in this league. They're at the bottom for a reason, so you've got to take care of business. And while you're trying to do that, Montreal is completely idle until Tuesday. Carolina's playing Nashville tonight. Columbus is playing Pittsburgh tonight and has had absolute fits with them all season and in seasons past. So you've got these other teams playing games where they're not favored in those games either, based on the history, based on the opposing records. And that's your opportunity to kind of strike here. There's a distinct possibility that the Flyers could close that gap from 7 points to 3 points if they win the next 2 games and everything shifts the right way with the way the previous history dictates and all of that. There's a possibility, and that would certainly make this whole thing come alive. But you have to win. First things first, you got to win Saturday against the Islanders, and then you've got to take care of business against Ottawa too. And then you can kind of take a step back with 2 more games out of the way, 13 to go after that, and see where you're at. If it's 13 games to go and you're 3 points out of a playoff spot, you are very much alive, especially with 2 games left against Carolina, a game against Montreal still on the schedule as well. You're going to play 2 of the teams you're chasing here. And to be able to kind of control your own destiny with that and know that you can come out and essentially turn that into a 4-point swing, win the game in regulation, get the 2 points, hold them to nothing, that could be what determines whether or not this team makes the playoffs or not.
Kevin Durso joining me on the World Kind of Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at Kevin_Durso. Kevin, I know we talk a lot about the goalies, talk a lot about the playoff hunt, but I want to focus on one of the specific guys on this team, well, 2 of them specifically, because I think that many times we overlook some of the other guys on the ice. Sean Couturier and Travis Konecny are both having really good seasons again this year. Couturier, I feel like he doesn't get enough love as a two-way player. In Konecny, he had a bit of a slump at one point this year, but he's really responded as a scorer and offensive force. Looking forward for this team beyond this year, do you feel like Couturier, Konecny, Sanheim, Provorov, that those are some of the guys that this team is going to build around long term?
Absolutely, I do. I think Sean Couturier has been the team's best forward all season, and it shows not just in the numbers, but the fact that he's so consistent with his defensive play. The fact that he can be that sturdy center that plays so well in his own zone and controls the play there. And then you see him step up and be able to put up games. You think about the game he had against Boston. It was way back in January, but to think about that game and go, him putting up a hat trick as well. So you've got a guy who's got some scoring touch. He's clearly got the offensive numbers for a second straight year to show that he's a legitimate scoring threat. And the defensive play never seems to waver, and that's the best thing. I think a lot of people got way too invested in those first few games for Couturier, and it's easy to forget at this stage of the season to go all the way back to October and think about how he was coming off of a major knee injury that took a lot of time to recover. He tried to play in the playoffs with it, and only had a 5-point game in a game where they were eliminated, but still had 5 points in that final game on a badly injured knee. So for him to do that and then come into this season, he started off a little slow in those first few games, but for where he is now, yeah, you have to look at him as a player that is one of your centerpieces moving forward. Konechny is very similar, in my opinion. What I like about Konechny is what you're seeing him do over these last few games specifically, because he has essentially filled the void of Wayne Simmons in terms of being an aggressor, being a guy who's almost a protector of sorts. And he's not a similar style player in any sense. He doesn't have the size that Simmons had first and foremost. But for him to be that guy who Nolan Patrick takes a bad hit, I'm going to stand up for my guy, and I'm going to come in and take care of business. It's so impressive to see him be that kind of leader for this team with the level of experience he has, and to take the place of somebody like Wayne Simmons. Essentially, no one's really going to replace Simmons for that kind of quality. But for him to try to do his best with it and really succeed, I think a lot of people, if anybody watched the Wired special from the Stadium series that NBC put out and saw how he is on the ice and how he's that agitator, he's very much like Brad Marchand of the Bruins in the sense that he gets under the skin of the opponent, and it helps him have more success too. And then not only the protector side of him, but the fact that the goals have been coming a little bit more too. He had a really nice goal against the Islanders on Sunday, and to see him playing like that and having that confidence again, that's the confidence he had at the end of last season too. And that was what impressed me the most about him, was how confident he can get. And when he's on, he's really on. So to see him have all of those sides to his game is just so impressive. And you mentioned Travis Sanheim and Ivan Provorov for the defensive side too. I've been so impressed by Travis Sanheim this season, just the amount that he's grown, especially since they made that assistant coaching change, Gord Murphy out, Rick Wilson in, and it's been completely night and day for him. How much he jumps into the offensive side of the play, how much he has become more defensively reliable too. To see him play in that kind of role and to essentially be filling the need of a top pairing defenseman. Sure, the Flyers would like to shore up the defensive side a little bit more. He does have moments where he's making a bad turnover still, but this is a second-year player who's grown so much and probably has been one of the most improved players on the team this season. So, and obviously Provorov's that minutes eater who just goes out and gives it everything he's got every night. And he struggled early in the year, but you're seeing the stability come back, and that's the best thing for him. So they've got four really good cornerstone pieces, and then you complement that with the guys from the other core that are hanging around. Jake Voracek's really stepped it up in the last few games, and after missing a couple games, too, with the injury that he had, he was missed, especially in that Washington game. So to have him back in the lineup tonight is going to be huge for this team, to have his leadership back, and to have Claude Giroux being the centerpiece of that core as well, and really bringing these kids into the picture and watching them grow. There's so many pieces of this team that are really good. It's just a matter of fitting it all into place and rounding it out with a couple little additions that probably will make this team not have to play this game in March where they're worried about what other teams are doing and how the scoreboard looks in trying to make the playoffs. It's, look, it does make a big difference when you have the goalie in the picture too. So now that Carter Hart's part of the picture and you have all these other young players that are solidifying their roles at these other positions, you've got a really good core that's forming and you can start to build around it.
Follow him on Twitter at Kevin_Durso. Flyers back in action tonight versus the Islanders. You can hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. and you can catch all of Kevin's coverage of the Flyers post-game and throughout the rest of this month on our website, 973ESPN.com. Kevin, enjoy the game tonight. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Josh.